Undertaker versus Giant Gonzalez. Many would say the Undertaker's worst WrestleMania match came out of this rivalry, but what about the story before and after the showdown at Caesar's Palace? What about their pay-per-view rematch that doesn't get talked about nearly as much, but it features some pretty important evolutionary steps in the Undertaker's career? Today we're going to take a look at everything from start to end in chronological order. We'll see what went wrong, what worked, and we'll leave no stone unturned as we dig into this pretty wacky rivalry from the Undertaker's past. Our story begins on January 3rd, 1993 on an episode of Wrestling Challenge, but it doesn't initially involve Giant Gonzalez. Kamala feuded with The Undertaker in 1992 and their rivalry ended in a casket match. Undertaker nailed the lid of the casket shut, and this, according to Kamala's manager Harvey Wippleman, changed Kamala forever. Wippleman held a grudge against The Undertaker, and this grudge would serve as the foundation for the Giant Gonzalez rivalry. Fast forward to the January 3rd, 1993 Wrestling Challenge taping, and Reverend Slick says he's tired of watching Kamala take abuse from Wippleman and Kim Chi. Slick said Kamala's not an animal, he's a man, and this was a sentiment that the crowd actually agreed with. Tensions continued to rise until the January 9th episode of Superstars with a match between Kamala and Dale Wolf. Before the match can get going, Kim Chi and Wippleman continued to slap Kamala around, and yeah, won't lie, this is a rough watch nowadays given the context. But after the match, Slick comes down to the ring when Wippleman and Kim Chi continue to assault Kamala. Reverend Slick tries to convince Kamala to turn against Wippleman and start working for him after Slick takes a punch from Kim Chi, and this is enough for Kamala to say screw this and attack his former managers. Kamala chases Wippleman away, thus turning Kamala into a good guy, but also leaving Harvey Wippleman without a wrestler to manage. On the January 16th episode of Superstars, we get the first promo between Reverend Slick and Kamala, and Slick talks about the abuse the big man suffered. Slick tells viewers that they want Kamala to see the light and the viewers should embrace Kamala in order for him to walk down a righteous path. Very wholesome stuff. Following this promo, we get to hear from Wippleman, and Harvey's blaming all of this on The Undertaker. He says Kim Chi's gonna handle Kamala while Wippleman himself's gonna drop a bomb on the WWF. The big bomb Harvey referred to would be the soon debuting Giant Gonzalez, albeit his name wasn't mentioned here. Jumping ahead, we arrive at the Royal Rumble in Sacramento, California, January 24th, 1993. The Dead Man enters at number 15, he eliminates a few guys, and it's only The Undertaker and the Berserker left in the ring. While the two go at it in the corner, Giant Gonzalez makes his debut. His manager Harvey Wippleman follows close by, and this giant newcomer's pointing right at The Undertaker. One thing to note, Giant Gonzalez was not named during the Rumble, so for the sake of simplicity, we're just going to call him by his name, though wrestling fans would recognize this titan as El Gigante from WCW. Taker eliminates Berserker as Giant Gonzalez steps over the ropes. Giant Gonzalez raises his hands in the air as Taker slowly turns his head around to see this giant standing in the ring. Gonzalez, with his arm still raised, takes a step forward towards The Undertaker. The Dead Man looks up to the giant while Gonzalez looks straight ahead, not even looking down at The Undertaker, something that reinforces how big the Giant Gonzalez really is. The Dead Man attempts to strike Gonzalez, but his punch is interrupted when Gonzalez lands a clubbing blow to The Undertaker's head. 2 chops is all it takes to send Taker flying over the top rope, so the Dead Man won't be winning the Royal Rumble this year. Gonzalez follows The Undertaker to the outside and the beatdown continues as per orders of Harvey Wippleman. The commentators are in shock as Gonzalez throws The Undertaker back into the ring, and it looks like The Undertaker's going to try a chokeslam, but it's Giant Gonzalez who ends up chokeslamming the Phenom. All the while, entrant 17, Damien Demento, waits on the outside. He's either too scared or too smart to get in the ring. Entrant number 18, IRS, makes his entrance. Gorilla Monsoon notes that Irwin's in no rush to get in there as Gonzalez wraps The Undertaker's leg around a ring post, and Harvey Wippleman's having a great old time here. He thinks this is brilliant. Feeling he's done enough damage, the Giant Gonzalez walks away. The Undertaker's completely wrecked, and the Phenom's having a lot of trouble trying to sit up. The Undertaker's been destroyed. Paul Bearer eventually returns to the ringside with the urn, reviving The Undertaker just enough to allow him to limp out of the 1993 Royal Rumble. Harvey had just received a small token of revenge against the man who beat Kamala at the 1992 Survivor Series, but you just know that eventually Gonzalez is going to face the Reaper one way or another. Before continuing on, yes, the bodysuit that Giant Gonzalez wore looked comically bad. We could talk about that for ages, but let's carry on and see what happened next. Almost 2 weeks following the events of the Royal Rumble, we'd finally get answers as to not only who attacked The Undertaker, but why. Mean Gene reveals it was a man known as Giant Gonzalez under the management of Harvey Wippleman. Wippleman says everyone now knows exactly what the big bomb is, and he also confirms that he wants to ruin The Undertaker because he ruined the mighty Kamala. The promo ends with Giant Gonzalez saying, "Undertaker, now it's your funeral." So that's it pretty much solidified. It's all about Harvey Wippleman getting revenge by any means necessary. On the February 13th, 1993 episode of Superstars, Mean Gene announces that a WrestleMania match between Undertaker and Gonzalez will happen at Caesar's Palace. And later in the show, we're treated to a Giant Gonzalez match. It's Gonzalez versus Louis Spicolli, Scott Bezos, and Dan Farron. The trio of terror get out of the ring as Giant Gonzalez and Harvey Wippleman make their entrance, and gotta say, I kinda like his atmospheric entrance music. The Giant's entrance is also very effective in terms of how it comes across on TV, with the production team continuously cutting to different people looking frightened. So credit where it's due. I mean, this rivalry needs all the credit it can get. The jobbers argue on the outside. No one wants to get in there and fight this monster. Gonzalez has no time for such petty squabbles. He chooses Spicolli, he picks him up by the hair, and he pulls Louis into the ring. Spicolli gets choked out while his teammates and the referee watch on. McMahon says on commentary that they're too intimidated by Gonzalez to do anything. Spicolli ends up taking a big chokeslam. Gonzalez then breaks his own pin to charge at the other two jobbers, and this just scares the absolute shit out of them. The boys run as fast as they can. Spicolli rolls out of the ring to join in on the getaway as Gonzalez basks in the crowd response. Again, we get more good crowd shots as Gonzalez and Harvey Wippleman celebrate in the ring. It wasn't much of a match, but still a decent and pretty effective introduction overall. WWF Raw, February 15th, 1993, a 16-man battle royal takes place in the middle of the show. Before the bout, Vince, Macho and Bob Bartlett discuss Giant Gonzalez wanting to be a competitor in this battle royal, but the other competitors oppose this. Can't say I blame them either. Gonzalez interrupts the battle royal anyway, just because he can, so yeah, it didn't really matter. At the end of the Battle Royal, we had Tatanka, Razor Ramon and Tito Santana as the final three when Gonzalez made his presence felt. Razor rolls under the bottom rope to safety. Gonzalez throws Tatanka over the top rope and he delivers a chop to Santana, also sending Tito over the top. Gonzalez plays up to the crowd by pounding on his chest before exiting the ring with Harvey Wippleman, and just in case you were wondering, Razor Ramon slips back into the ring to win the Battle Royal. On the following episode of Superstars, The Undertaker and Paul Bearer cut a promo after Taker disposes of Raven Clark. Bearer pleads to Harvey Wippleman to make Gonzalez understand that death and courage are closely related and that sometimes death is the price for courage. I love this line, by the way. Undertaker says when Giant Gonzalez attacked him, he inadvertently opened the container that holds all that's evil and all that's unholy. Gonzalez will be destroyed by The Undertaker, and the dead man tells his upcoming WrestleMania opponent to rest in peace. The following week on Superstars, we got the first full interview with Giant Gonzalez and Harvey Wippleman. Wippleman starts out by blaming The Undertaker for ruining his business relationship with Kamala, reminding us that Kamala wasn't the same after the casket match at Survivor Series, and adding that The Undertaker will never be the same again after WrestleMania. Harvey goes on to say that he gives The Undertaker credit as he truly is a big man, but Gonzalez is a giant eager to put his hands on The Undertaker once again. The dead man's going to suffer a giant defeat, a giant humiliation, and a giant funeral. Gonzalez finishes up the promo by nearly ripping Rougeau's arm off as he says, "Undertaker, I will bury you." Easy, big fella, easy. Later on, Paul Bearer would bring up an interesting point. No one has ever attempted to do what Gonzalez did at the Royal Rumble. However, The Undertaker's urn was not at ringside during the attack. Bearer stated that this was the source of The Undertaker's power, and once the urn returned to the ring, The Undertaker was able to move again. This is true, but do remember that The Undertaker ended up limping to the back following the attack. The Undertaker finishes this promo by saying Gonzalez is a man and The Undertaker is an entity that cannot be destroyed. The dead man signs it off as usual by saying Gonzalez will rest in peace. A week later, on the March 6th episode of Superstars, we got more Gonzalez and Wippleman goodness. A promo early in the show has Wippleman taunting The Undertaker, saying it's almost time for WrestleMania as he continues to put over the size of Giant Gonzalez. Gonzalez makes a lot of hand and arm movements for some reason, and Gonzalez is, I guess, trying to come across as intimidating and all that, but I don't know, man. It all feels and looks a bit silly. I don't want to say this is the first sign of trouble when leading into WrestleMania, but the one thing Gonzalez had going for him at this point was his semi-subdued composure. Also, the Giant's facial expressions can be quite hilarious as he gets more and more passionate. Wippleman talks, Gonzalez gets excited, and some of the faces he pulls makes for some incredible screenshots. Later in the show, Mean Gene's Mania report gets interrupted when McMahon states both Wippleman and Gonzalez are in the center of the ring and they're looking for The Undertaker, even though you can clearly hear Wippleman state that they're just going to be facing off against The Undertaker at WrestleMania. Thanks, Vinnie Mac. The bit comes to an end with Gonzalez saying rest in peace and the crowd shower the villainous duo with booze. 2 nights later, on the March 8th, 1993 episode of Raw, Paul Bearer and The Undertaker respond back in a promo saying that Gonzalez tried to make the hunter the hunted. The few who tried this in the past were led down to rest, and the Giant Gonzalez will suffer the same fate. The next week on Raw, Bobby Heenan interviews Wippleman and Gonzalez in the ring. Wippleman talks about dropping a huge surprise on the WWF at the Royal Rumble, and that surprise was the Giant Gonzalez. The big man hasn't been able to completely prove how awesome he is though, because his opponents either don't show up or they run away. The only man to not fear Gonzalez has been The Undertaker, and when that happened he was beaten, annihilated and destroyed. Heenan attempts to stir some shit by saying The Undertaker said he was going to put Gonzalez in the biggest coffin he had ever seen, and when the crowd pop, Wippleman says the fans are just ignorant before saying The Undertaker better have a real big coffin at WrestleMania because he and Paul Bearer are going into it. The interview ends with Heenan asking Gonzalez what his plans are for The Undertaker. Giant nearly crushes Heenan's hand, pulling the mic to his face as he says, "Undertaker, I have a giant surprise for you. I do like a good surprise." Later on, Taker and Bearer get a chance to respond to Gonzalez via a promo, with Paul saying Gonzalez doesn't have to look very far for The Undertaker, all he has to do is show up at WrestleMania. Taker says he stands in the Giant's nightmares each sleepless night, which doesn't really make sense when you think about it, but Undertaker says that as each day passes, the nightmare gets closer to becoming a reality. On the night before the March to WrestleMania show during the March 27th episode of Superstars, we get a new promo cut by The Undertaker and Paul Bearer. I should mention here that the WWF were very fond of replaying the same pre-tape promos during this time period over and over again, but anything new will get mentioned in this video. Bearer's excited that WrestleMania is just a week away, he can hardly contain himself, and neither can I. And The Undertaker says, the sands now fall rapidly through the hourglass. Soon, Giant Gonzalez, you'll take your rightful place along with all the other battered corpses in our graveyard, and I will possess your soul. Spooky stuff. On the March to WrestleMania show, we get a main event match featuring Undertaker and Bam Bam Bigelow following a brief Royal Rumble recap. After the finish, The Undertaker and Paul Bearer celebrate in the ring. Harvey Wippleman and the Giant then appear on the entranceway. The crowd's pretty hyped for this, by the way, as the two men have a brief stare down, and The Undertaker then heads towards his Mania opponent, showing no fear. Officials are forced to intervene in order to prevent these two titans from clashing before Mania, and do keep in mind that this is the first time since their Rumble encounter that Taker and Gonzalez have been near each other. The WWF used to build matches in a whole different manner back then, but generally speaking, keeping both guys apart for so long was a good move. Superstars, April 3rd, 1993, Wippleman and Gonzalez join McMahon, Lawler and Macho Man for an interview. Wippleman immediately tells Vince to shut up, and Giant Gonzalez is wearing a suit. Looking good, my guy, looking good. Custom made without a doubt. Gonzalez gives Jerry Lawler a handshake as he takes his place next to the four men, completely dwarfing everyone in the room. Wippleman again cuts the same old promo he's been cutting for quite a while now, talking about Gonzalez destroying The Undertaker again, just like the Royal Rumble, all that stuff. Gonzalez, meanwhile, looks like he's having a great old time. He's smiling and laughing as he makes a dice gesture before saying, "Undertaker, you just rolled snake eyes." You know, as cheesy as all this stuff comes off, I'd be lying if I didn't say Gonzalez was a little bit charming here. Not a lot, but just enough to where I don't immediately feel like hitting fast forward. We then cut over to a pre-recorded match, Giant Gonzalez versus Virgil. When you think about it, there hasn't been a whole lot of televised matches featuring Gonzalez, and according to Cage Match, Gonzalez did work quite a few house shows. But let's take a look and see how Gonzalez fares here, since this is the episode before Mania. The Giant grabs Virgil by the throat and he throws him barreling into the corner. The big man wants a test of strength, so Virgil, thinking he can take the Giant, climbs to the top rope and we see a struggle between the two men. Slowly but surely, Virgil succumbs to the awesome power of Giant Gonzalez, with the big man slowly twisting Virgil's arms. He smiles and laughs as he forces Virgil down one turnbuckle at a time. And now it's time for some Gonzalez punishment in the corner. Virgil has no chance here. Gonzalez sends his opponent into the ropes, and in an act of desperation, Virgil slides under the big man before hitting him with a dropkick. Gonzalez no-sells it and he deflects a second one before nailing Virgil with a hard clothesline. Our match comes to an end with Gonzalez choking Virgil down on the mat. He lifts him back up by the throat, we see a chokeslam, and Gonzalez continues to choke Virgil out as the ref counts 1, 2, 3. After the match, Virgil takes another chokeslam and he continues to get choked out before a team of referees finally intervene. So the Giant Gonzalez is looking pretty good heading into Caesar's Palace for WrestleMania. Alright, here we are, WrestleMania IX, The Undertaker versus Giant Gonzalez. This is what everyone remembers, probably the first thing they think of when they think of Giant Gonzalez. The match takes place in the semi-main spot. First out is Giant Gonzalez and Harvey Wippleman. Giant stops halfway down the ramp to have a quick chat with what I assume are some of his biggest fans before continuing down to the ring. Green smoke appears at the entranceway as The Undertaker makes his entrance via a chariot being pulled by two random dudes. Next to Taker is a vulture perched with its wings stretched out for most of the ride down. Once Taker makes it down to the ring and the handler goes to take the bird away, it immediately starts freaking out. But still, say what you want about the match itself, The Undertaker's entrance is very memorable. The bell had to ring sooner or later though. Paul removes Taker's jacket, Gonzalez turns to face his opponent, and here we go. From the corner, Undertaker looks over his shoulder at the taunting Giant Gonzalez. Gonzalez takes a step forward, egging The Undertaker on, and without fear, the dead man walks right up to the big man. Giant takes the initiative, giving Taker a strong clubbing blow to the back. Taker no-sells it. Gonzalez throws another big club. This time The Undertaker does partially sell it, but again he walks right back up to Giant Gonzalez. This happens one more time and Gonzalez is now shocked. He goes for a fourth attempt, but this time the dead man blocks it before returning with a strike of his own. A strike that misses by a mile, by the way. Still, Giant's a little shook as Taker connects with another strike. This one thankfully connects a lot better. A third hit makes Gonzalez fall back into the corner. The Undertaker attempts to capitalize by choking his opponent out. However, Gonzalez grabs Taker by the throat and he walks him back to the middle of the ring. Gonzalez stops halfway and he yells at the crowd before walking Taker all the way back to the opposite corner. Undertaker attempts to fight back by climbing to the second rope to choke out Gonzalez. The Giant eases up his death grip, but immediately he follows up with a low blow. That's not very sportsmanlike. But the Phenom takes the advantage by striking Gonzalez before walking the ropes to deliver old school. It's not a good sign when Undertaker goes for old school this early in a match, but Taker continues his attack in the corner with punches and kicks. The ref breaks up Taker's onslaught, giving Gonzalez enough time to regain some composure, and Gonzalez nails Taker with a big boot followed by a clothesline. Gonzalez throws yet another clubbing blow before hitting the dead man with a hip toss, sending the Phenom to the other side of the ring. He then performs a standing reverse chinlock, so I don't want to hear any talk about this dude having a limited moveset. It goes to the mat, but Taker makes it back to his feet once after falling to one knee. Eventually though, the sheer awesomeness of the reverse chinlock is just too much for The Undertaker as he takes a seat on the canvas. A chinlock that put The Undertaker on his ass. This is the best Mania match ever. The ref moves in to check and make sure The Undertaker is still conscious, but the power of the urn apparently trumps the deadly arts of chinlockery as The Undertaker fights his way back up. Gonzalez takes a few punches, but Taker's comeback gets cut down abruptly and the match goes to the outside. The dead man takes chops, clubbing blows and a few bumps at the ring steps. But the power of the urn makes the Undertaker get up and get himself back in the ring. Gonzalez doesn't understand how Taker can keep coming back after all the punishment he's taken, but Taker fights back with more punches and kicks as he leads Gonzalez back into the corner. The big man takes more and more strikes to the face and midsection until Gonzalez has finally had enough. Wippleman jumps up to cause a distraction, but not before throwing what looks like a towel into the ring. While the dead man attempts to choke out the slimy manager, Paul Bearer jumps up on the opposite side of the ring as Giant Gonzalez picks up that towel. Gonzalez hits Paul with a headbutt before using that towel on the Undertaker. The dead man gets smothered as the ref just kinda keeps asking, hey, what's going on here? On commentary, Bobby Heenan and Randy Savage agree that it smells like chloroform coming from that towel. But keep in mind that this isn't an ODQ match and the ref's counting down like Gonzalez put the Undertaker in a standard wrestling hold. Never mind the fact that the commentators can smell the chloroform quite some distance away, yet the ref's got no fucking idea what's going on. It's dreadful. The bell's finally rung after the Giant refuses to take that towel off the dead man's face, forcing a DQ victory for the Undertaker. Taker passes out and the Giant celebrates in the ring. The fans in attendance rightfully boo the awful finish. Officials make their way down to the ring and they pull Undertaker out. Gonzalez plays up to the crowd and he even chokeslams a referee as the Undertaker gets put on a stretcher. The audience are now shouting bullshit, but the commentators attempt to cover this up by saying they're chanting Hogan. Not the best save in the world, but they had to do something, I guess. Things are looking grim, but we hear the Undertaker's gong. The power of the urns brought the Phenom back to life. The dead man has re-risen. The Undertaker stumbles back down to the ring. Gonzalez is shocked. Undertaker steps in the ropes to deliver punches, kicks, 2 clotheslines, and finally a jumping clothesline. This is enough to put Gonzalez down. Paul Bearer attempts to hold the Phenom back as Gonzalez gets escorted out of Caesar's Palace by security guards. And there you have it, the match that many people say is the worst of the Undertaker's whole WrestleMania run. That being said, and I'm just being honest here, I'd rather watch this than The Undertaker vs Jake Roberts. At least there's a little comedy value in the WrestleMania IX match. On the April 10th episode of Superstars, Paul Bearer and The Undertaker got interviewed by Mean Gene Okerlund. Right out the gate, Okerlund says he could smell chloroform during the WrestleMania match and he asks Paul Bearer straight away if chloroform was used in the match. Bearer says Harvey Wippleman did indeed put something on that cloth that knocked The Undertaker out, but he goes on to gleefully state that The Undertaker wasn't out for very long. The Undertaker came back and in the end, Gonzalez fell down like a big old oak tree. The Undertaker finishes off the interview by saying Gonzalez gets weaker while the dead man grows stronger. He also states that Gonzalez avoided him at the end of the WrestleMania match and time's running out for the Giant. So clearly, the feud's going to continue on past WrestleMania for better or worse. Later on, during Sean Mooney's WrestleMania report, Mooney stated that Undertaker vs Gonzalez was one of the most memorable matches in WrestleMania history. And, you know, in a way, he's right. It's just that it was memorable for all the wrong reasons. We now go back to pre-tape promos as the next phase of this rivalry begins on TV. On Superstars airing on the 17th of April, Paul Bearer says death hangs heavy in our lives, and one death that hangs heavy in the minds of both The Undertaker and Paul Bearer is the death of the Giant Gonzalez. Taker says it's now time for the Giant's question to be answered, and the question is, why can The Undertaker not be destroyed? He says in order to have the answer, Gonzalez would need to come with him to the dark side, where he will end up spending an eternity. The May 1st episode of Superstars begins with Ray Rougeau interviewing Paul and Taker. Rougeau sucks up to The Undertaker by saying the dead man's unstoppable, and while Paul agrees, he also states that The Undertaker is the most powerful entity in not just the World Wrestling Federation, but on the entire planet. Undertaker says he's growing tired of these attempts of destroying something that cannot be destroyed. Taker will not only draw power from the souls of the deceased, but he'll also use those of the living. Gonzalez must now enter the world of the dark side, where only The Undertaker survives. Later on, Wippleman cuts a promo saying the WWF has tons of superstars and he tells them all to line up because Gonzalez is going to knock them down. Whippleman continues saying that they haven't forgotten about Randy Savage, Kamala, Virgil, or the Rocket Owen Hart, and that Gonzalez is planning on knocking them all down like bowling pins. He then compares Undertaker to a jack-in-the-box. He just keeps popping back up, but it won't be long before the Undertaker stays down for good. We're now on the road to King of the Ring, and Gonzalez has Tatanka in his sights. Tatanka faces Gonzalez in a first-round TV match. Before the King of the Ring first round match, we stop off at the May 8th episode of Superstars. Wippleman says Undertaker's continued to come back not because of guts or tenacity, but because of sheer stupidity. He says that the next Gonzalez vs Undertaker match will be the final match Undertaker ever has in WWF, but for now, Tatanka is next in line to get decapitated by the Giant Gonzalez. On the following episode of Raw, Harvey Wippleman is revealed as the new manager to the recently debuted Mr. Hughes. This may have seemed a bit random and Harvey's plate was maybe already full, but Wippleman was slowly amassing an army to take on The Undertaker. Hughes will play a role in this storyline moving forward. The Gonzalez vs Tatanka match takes place on the May 15th episode of Superstars, and the Giant has no time for Tatanka dancing around the ring. One big clubbing blow puts Tatanka on the mat and things are already looking grim. Gonzalez puts Tatanka into the corner and he chokes him out before throwing him into the other corner. He then hits him with a big knee and another clubbing blow to Tatanka's back. Lots of clubbing blows in this video. Tatanka ends up taking a big boot from the Giant before Gonzalez can go for a chokeslam. Tatanka fights back with a few shots to the midsection and a few kicks to the leg. He then goes upstairs for a big chop and the Giant now seems dazed. Can Tatanka possibly beat this monster? Tatanka lands another big chop off the top rope, but a third attempt fails. Gonzalez grabs Tatanka and he proceeds to choke his opponent out. He won't let go, so the ref calls for a DQ and Gonzalez plants Tatanka with another chokeslam. Tatanka defeats Giant Gonzalez and he's going to continue on in the King of the Ring tournament. Wippleman screams that this is exactly what he wanted. The intent here was not to only send a message to The Undertaker, but to the WWF as a whole. Wippleman and Gonzalez will do this to every competitor that gets in their way. Following this match, we wouldn't see Gonzalez or The Undertaker on TV for a few weeks. The two would still compete in a few house show matches, but the feud seemed to stall a bit as Harvey Whipple managed Mr. Hughes. However, on the June 12th episode of Superstars, the night before the first King of the Ring pay-per-view, we would see the story progress quite a bit as The Undertaker faced PJ Walker, also known as Just Incredible. As The Undertaker pins Walker, Giant Gonzalez and Harvey Wippleman come down to ringside, this being the first face-to-face confrontation since that classic WrestleMania match. The two come to blows, with Undertaker getting the upper hand against Gonzalez. However, help comes in the form of one Mr. Hughes. Paul Bearer gets attacked and that dastardly Harvey Wippleman gets his hands on The Undertaker's urn. The Undertaker then gets attacked by his own source of power. Over and over again, Hughes hits The Undertaker with the urn, and the Phenom joins Paul Bearer in getting completely laid out. The segment ends with both Paul Bearer and The Undertaker completely destroyed, while Wippleman, Hughes and Gonzalez stand triumphant. So it seems like we're treading old ground as the villains get the upper hand once again just before the big pay-per-view match. We get a SummerSlam report on the Superstars episode airing on July 17th, and it's made official. Gonzalez vs Undertaker 2 is going to take place, and it's going to be a rest in peace match. What is a rest in peace match? We'll have to wait to find out. The next interview took place on Wrestling Challenge, where the King spends the first few minutes roasting The Undertaker, but the dead man doesn't sell it. Instead, he just stares a hole right through the King. Eventually, Lawler states he wanted to bring The Undertaker out because there was something missing from him, and that was the urn. Lawler laughs as he says a close personal friend of his named Mr. Hughes has that urn, and Mr. Hughes plans on putting the remains of the dead man inside. The Undertaker intimidates the King by saying he's too concerned about The Undertaker's belongings, whereas he should be concerned about how close he's standing to death's door. The King makes a valiant escape, and The Undertaker continues on by saying Mr. Hughes has something in his possession that belongs to The Undertaker. If Hughes brings it back now, his demise will be quick. However, if The Undertaker has to go looking for the urn, then Mr. Hughes will suffer a slow and agonizing death. Kemp Wippleman, quite stupidly, do not give in to the demands of The Undertaker. Instead, they continue their march towards SummerSlam while keeping the urn in their possession. Between now and SummerSlam, there are no more Raw shows containing any build-up for this feud. However, on the August 14th episode of Superstars, Mean Gene gets an interview with Harvey Wippleman. Mean Gene comes right out the gate with the hard questions, saying The Undertaker hasn't been around and Wippleman hasn't been doing his homework because Harvey does not know what the ground rules are for the rest in peace match. Wippleman, despite the mind games being played on him, remains cool, saying he's not the least bit concerned with any of the details of this SummerSlam match. He does, however, bring up an interesting point, saying Gonzalez is too big to fit into any kind of casket or coffin, so I guess we can rule out a casket match. Gene, however, offers a counterpoint when he says Taker could still bring a casket for Harvey himself, but again, Wippleman just waves it off, saying Undertaker still needs to go through the Giant Gonzalez. We get the final promo before SummerSlam on the August 28th episode of Superstars. It's pretty basic, with Wippleman saying Undertaker's gonna leave the WWF a humiliated man because he couldn't beat the Giant Gonzalez. Gonzalez says, "This time, you rest in peace, Undertaker." And you know something, it does feel like WWF were pretty much done with this whole feud by this point. There's nothing remotely deep or interesting about this run up to SummerSlam, and it definitely feels like Gonzalez was being phased out or he fell out of favour. We arrive at SummerSlam 1993 and the rest in peace match is a no disqualification bout. Nothing more, nothing less. It's kind of a letdown. Hardfinkel says at the start of the match this is no DQ, no countout, there must be a decisive winner. Wippleman comes out with the Giant Gonzalez and he's carrying the urn. The lights go out in the arena and the crowd goes wild as the dead man makes his way down to the ring. Paul Bearer is not here due to his injuries, so the Phenom doesn't have his guiding light for this SummerSlam match. It's time for Undertaker vs Gonzalez 2. It can only be better than last time, right? The bell rings and Taker wastes no time getting vengeance, not only for WrestleMania IX but for the attack on Paul Bearer and the theft of his mystical urn. Gonzalez takes strike after strike in the corner before Taker chokes out the big man while climbing up to the second rope, and you can tell that Gonzalez is scared of this new, more relentless Undertaker. Wippleman jumps on the ropes in an attempt to cause a distraction. The Phenom drops his chokehold on Gonzalez and he stares down Wippleman. He's not about to let another Mania 9 incident occur. Gonzalez takes this opportunity to recompose himself before nailing the Undertaker with a big kick. More kicks and, you guessed it, clubbing blows leads to a big headbutt, but the Undertaker won't go down. Gonzalez throws Taker against the ropes, but the dead man ducks a clothesline and he hits Gonzalez with a jumping clothesline. Another clothesline further stuns the big man, but on Taker's third attempt he's met with a strike from Gonzalez that sends him down to the mat. The dead man rises, the crowd goes crazy, Gonzalez screams at the fans before throwing the dead man to the outside. The two trade blows until a rake to the face puts Gonzalez in control. He slams the Undertaker face first on the apron and the Phenom gets thrown into the ring steps. While the Undertaker attempts to recover, Gonzalez grabs a steel chair. He hits the dead man in the midsection before landing a chair shot straight on the Undertaker's back. It appears that the Undertaker's in a bad spot right now, but don't count him out just yet. Gonzalez screams, "Who rests in peace now?" as Taker struggles to stand up. The big man helps Undertaker to his feet before again throwing him into the ring steps. Gonzalez re-enters the ring and he begins playing up to the crowd as the Undertaker starts reaching out and gaining his strength back, but he's not able to regain his full strength before Gonzalez returns to the outside. Gonzalez does a little more damage before sending the dead man back into the ring. Back inside we get this great shot from the urn's perspective as the Undertaker crawls over to it, but he gets stopped in his tracks by his opponent. The dead man starts to fight back with 3 big punches before going for the urn again. However, slimy Harvey Wippleman's there to snatch it away just before the dead man can get his hands on it. Gonzalez, with a big old smile on his face, throws Undertaker to the other side of the ring, making the dead man crash hard into the corner. Gonzalez again screams, "Who rests in peace now?" as Undertaker again tries to get the urn, but the giant just steps in front of him. All hope is seemingly lost. As Gonzalez pulls Taker away, we hear the Undertaker's gong in the arena as the crowd rise to their feet. We cut over to the entranceway and what do you know, Paul Bearer's alive and he's carrying a black wreath down the ringside. Taker continues to take damage in the corner as Paul Bearer places his wreath at ringside while looking over at Harvey Wippleman. Harvey thinks he can take Paul Bearer on, so he removes his jacket and he lunges at the dead man's manager. Paul does not mess around though, and Harvey finds himself getting wiped out with a clothesline. The crowd goes wild as Paul finally retrieves the urn, but back inside the ring, the Undertaker gets laid out with a slam. Gonzalez notices Paul as the dead man struggles to get up, but Bearer raises the urn and the Undertaker, feeling the power of the urn, rises up as well. The dead man's back as he hits Gonzalez with a couple of strikes and not one, not two, but 4 running clotheslines. The big man still standing up, but one more strike from the Undertaker brings Giant Gonzalez to his knees. Our match then comes to an end as the Undertaker climbs to the top rope and in dramatic fashion the dead man leaps into the sky and he hits Gonzalez with a final clothesline. 1, 2, 3, the Undertaker's finally toppled the Giant Gonzalez. Following the match, Taker sets the wreath next to Gonzalez as Paul holds the urn up high. The dead man then salutes the urn and the two head back up the rampway. More evolution of The Undertaker. Back inside the ring, Gonzalez is asking Harvey Wippleman what happened to the urn. He tries to explain while pedaling back from the big man. Gonzalez has finally had enough with Wippleman's crap, so he gives Harvey a big chokeslam before putting the remains of the wreath on Harvey's lifeless body. After all that, it was Harvey who ended up being the one resting in peace. Gonzalez was pretty much done with the WWF after turning his back on Harvey, but the crowd cheered when all this happened. It makes you wonder if the fans would have maybe accepted Gonzalez as a babyface if he stayed with WWF a little longer and in a more regular basis. Following SummerSlam, Giant Gonzalez would only have 2 more matches in WWF, one against Randy Savage on the WWF TSN show in Canada, and an appearance on the October 4th, 1993 episode of Raw, where he competed in a Battle Royal for an Intercontinental title shot after it was announced Shawn Michaels had vacated the belt on the previous episode. He was the first eliminated from the Battle Royal, by the way. Gonzalez would then leave WWF and head over to Japan in 1994. As for The Undertaker, the dead man moved into a feud with Yokozuna. That one culminated in a memorable Royal Rumble casket match. Undertaker would take some time off after this match, and he eventually returned to face the $1 Million Man's Undertaker at SummerSlam 94. The Undertaker vs Gonzalez feud is remembered due to the lackluster matches the two had against each other, and really, it's all centered around The Undertaker trying to get the most out of an extremely limited opponent. It's new generation nonsense at its finest though, and even though we can all laugh at the match quality, it's still bizarrely entertaining watching these two try to make something out of nothing. The SummerSlam match I feel was better than the WrestleMania match, but the WrestleMania match was more memorable. Anyway, thank you very much for watching this one, guys. I hope you enjoyed it, and please take care.